Welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Pastor Rick Utze from Maranatha in Plain City, Ohio. You know, with this pandemic going on and with COVID-19, there's a lot of things, right, that probably could have been done differently or better. And we hear people all across the spectrum blaming others. I mean, from people at the highest levels, right, in our country and around the world, blaming organizations in other countries. You know, China did this or that, the president didn't do this, the states didn't do that. There's just all kinds of things. And I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is this is like something we've never gone through before. Like, it's difficult to go through suffering and hard times and hardships, especially at a time when it hasn't ever happened. And that doesn't mean that people weren't predicting it could happen and that we couldn't have been better prepared, or that, you know, people couldn't have made different decisions. They could have. But I even look at my own life and the church, and, you know, we don't even have a big church, and yet you got to make decisions that affect other people. And so what do we and how do we think about these things? How do we think about the difficult times as we go through them? Even us at a level where we don't really have much decision-making power in our country, we can still look out right on Facebook, and I don't know where you are on the divide of social distancing and how much you adhere to it or don't, but there's probably somebody on one side or the other that is way more strict than you or way more lenient, and you can look at that and make judgments and all this stuff that's happening. And I think that we need to give each other just a little bit of grace in times of suffering, in times of difficulty, in times of hardship, because that's what God extends us. And there's a purpose behind it all. Like, when we're complaining and we're making judgments and we're doing all these things, we're basically, you know, saying that God, maybe what you brought into my life, and we're judging him for his goodness, isn't good enough. And yes, there is sin in the world and there is evil. Matter of fact, because there is sin and evil is why we have suffering, disease, pandemics going on, because the whole world's been cursed because of man's sin. And Jesus and God in his word says this about hard times in Hebrews 2:10. It says, "For in bringing many sons and daughters to glory." So it's talking about, you know, Jesus and God are bringing many sons and daughters to glory. But how's he doing it? It was entirely appropriate that God, for whom and through whom all things exist, like all things were created for God, by God, to God. And it says that he should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through sufferings. Who's the pioneer? Who's the source? Who's the champion of our salvation, of being saved from the one thing that has spread to all mankind? The biggest need by far in our world today is for us to be saved from our sin, from our wrongdoing, from our evil hearts, from our rebellion, from our sin against a holy God. And he says the pioneer was Jesus Christ. He's the one that came down, and God made him complete through sufferings. Like what Jesus had to go through for you and me to die on that cross, he suffered greatly. He took our sin and punishment. It's the gospel. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of Jesus Christ for us. And even he was made complete to be our high priest in heaven, to intercede for us through the sufferings. The one who sanctifies and those who are sanctified, Jesus, who is the one who sets us apart and makes us holy, and we who are in the process of becoming more like Christ. We have one Father. That's our Father in heaven. And Jesus is not ashamed to call them, us, his brothers and sisters. Like, he's not ashamed to call us brothers and sisters in our mess, in our sin, right? In all the problems that we create. He's not ashamed to call us that. He's got a heart for his people. His heart is burdened and bursting forth, waiting to show mercy and compassion. And then Peter says, you know what? Because Christ suffered for you, he's leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. So we should follow in Jesus' steps, who described his own heart as gentle and lowly. We should follow there. I wonder how many could describe our own hearts as gentle and lowly to those around us in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of hard times and suffering. And you know, We often say, you do you and I'll do me, and that's never what Jesus said. Jesus says that we should do Jesus. And to do Jesus, we have to walk like Jesus walked. So here's the bottom line. This week, I wonder if people who you don't agree with or who don't act like you, who are different from you, would look at you and say that your heart is gentle and lowly, and that you would be drawing them to yourself and thus to Jesus Christ. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Bottom Line.